Hello and welcome back to the Earn Your Badge from Home program. Today y'all are going to be earning your Coding for Good badge by completing a project using HTML and JavaScript. And we're going to keep touching on the concepts that we've been talking about like functions, variables, and arrays. So let's just get started.
Okay, so y'all should be at the first template linked on assignment 3 on Google Classroom. So here is where we're kind of going to take our first deep dive into learning about variables and functions using HTML and JavaScript. So what we have here is I've hit run on my screen and I kind of have this really ugly smiley face like situation going on over here, right? And this was drawn using my code here on the side. So let's kind of just look at this piece by piece. How was I able to get each of these individual elements showing up on my screen? So here, first of all, we're in our HTML section of our panel, but we are working with both HTML and JavaScript. All of our JavaScript code is underneath this tag here that says script. So everything in here between these two words that say script is JavaScript code. Now, what are tags? Well, tags are what we use in HTML to kind of distinguish what kind of properties we want to apply on the text we're placing between them. So here I have a canvas tag, and I created a canvas, which is something that I can use from HTML to then pair with JavaScript and draw different circles and shapes and colors on to have it display. Canvas is what everything is displaying on top of. So another example of a tag in HTML is the header tag. So to create this, I'm going to find the less than symbol. I'm going to say H1, and I'm going to find the greater than symbol to close it, and then see how its closing tag automatically completed for me. So anything that's between these two little pieces of code, any text I place between them on this line here, is going to have the properties of the tag apply on it. In this case, a property of the header is displaying text that's very large and bolded. Right, so I'm going to type in, this is my header. And then when I hit run, I have text that appears quite large, right? And we have about 6 different kinds of headers. So if I change this to say 2, I'm going to get another, it's going to look like a header, it's just going to be smaller. So I hit run. So see, each of these tags withholds different properties that get applied to whatever's placed in between them. So here, let's just call this a self-portrait. So let me hit run, and then I'll go back to making it H1 because I like it nice and big. So that is HTML. And we already talked about how this is me kind of creating like a backdrop for me to have my image display on top of. So let's now look in our JavaScript portion of this. So what we did was we stored our canvas in a variable, and we did some other stuff with it to basically just say we're creating some sort of backdrop for all of our shapes to appear on top of. We're storing the information of what we named our canvas. We gave it a name called My Canvas so that we can access it later in our HTML. Basically, this piece is what allows my JavaScript and my HTML to collaborate and have one piece be on top of the other. The piece meaning my drawing being on top of my HTML panel like that plain white panel that's where my HTML displays. And so that information of them essentially being able to locate each other is stored in a variable. We know this because that's what var stands for. Var is short for variable. We gave it a name of canvas, saying that is where my information is stored, and then we wrote some code to allow them to collaborate and identify each other. So then down here, all of our CTX is quite literally like the physical like canvas. See that like shaded gray line? That's where all my shapes are going to be displaying on top of. So we just have to say, on top of my canvas, let's draw a circle. So in order to draw a circle, I use something called a function. Functions are essentially little mini pieces of instructions that they require certain inputs. And then using the information that they gather, it's very similar to functions in math. Using the information that they gather from the input, it applies some sort of instruction on it, whether it's saying, this is the code to create a circle, this is the code to create, I don't know, like a semicircle or something, and then ultimately output it. So what it requires is, okay, How big does my circle need to be? What does its radius need to be? It requires certain pieces of information for us to determine how large or how small we want our circle, right? So then that is the information that we give it. So here, an example of a function is my .arc function. It's saying I need to take in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different pieces of information, 5 inputs. And as long as my programmer writes those 5 inputs, it'll output the circle that they desire. So here, the first number is going to be the x coordinate. So all our circles here start from the center. So if I'm trying to move my circle, I look at it from the middle out. So the x coordinate of where this circle is, or where the center of my circle is, the y coordinate of where the center of my circle is, the radius, and the last two have to do with being able to complete the circle, either whether you want to draw a semicircle or a full one. So to just kind of mess with this a little bit, here I'm going to change this number to say 100 and see how my large brown circle shifts. So I'm going to hit run. So see how this moved up and to the left? It's because I decreased both of these numbers. So same thing, imagine an XY grid, right? If we're going to decrease our X, it's going to go less and less. So then think about this panel, whatever the size of my canvas is kind of the grid that we're working with. So this being changed to 0, 0, see what happens to my circle. Remember, all of this moves in reference to the center. So see how I can see exactly of a quarter of my circle? That's because this is 0 and this is 0. So all the way out here would be 300 because our canvas is 300 by 300. Now, what do all these numbers represent? Is it centimeters? Is it inches? What? It's pixels. So if you're not familiar with what a pixel is, easiest way to kind of imagine it is think about a mosaic. And a mosaic is made up of a bunch of really teeny tiny little pieces, and together it makes this whole image, right? So a pixel is like one of those singular teeny tiny little pieces. And so your computer screen is made up of thousands and thousands of different pixels. And they form a grid on your screen. And each individual pixel has its own little piece of light that's calibrated to then, when they're all put together, form your computer screen. So since they form a grid as well, we can use them as a way of measurement. So we can say this is going to be 0, 0, like on an XY grid. And then I want my panel, I want my canvas to be 300 by 300. That's what this piece does. Right there. And so then we can say, okay, this is considered 0, 0. That means down here is 300 for my Y and over here is 300 for my X. So that's how we can use to adjust these. So I'm going to change mine back to being 150. And then let's take a look at what this number does. So this is my radius. Let's make this also 75. So let's see how, so my circle is going to go back to being in the center because again, halfway for 300 and 300. It's just going to be a lot smaller. So now it's half the size because I decreased its radius. So that's my third input. I'm going to change this back to being 150. So now take a second, see what happens when you change your fourth input. Don't delete any of the commas, by the way, just if you want to adjust the numbers, you can. It's basically saying what point it should begin drawing at and how far it should go, like around. So then I'm going to change this back to being at 0, so it begins in the right spot. And then here, I'm going to change this to say, oopsies, 1 times math.pi. So now I only get half. Okay, so I don't want you to think too deep about that. This video is going to be a lot longer if I try to explain exactly what these parts mean, but just know they adjust how much of your circle itself gets drawn. But, okay, so what we're going to look at one more before I let y'all take a second and make your self-portrait look more like you rather than me, is I want to talk about the Ctx Dot Fill Style. So what we can do is here's where we determine the color which we want our circle to be. And this can either be given by us just simply typing in a color, or if we want to be more specific as to the shade, we can give what looks like a random jumble of letters and numbers. Well, you see, with color, especially in computers, a color has something called a hex value. That hex value is basically like the balance of light that it takes to create that color And for every single shade on the spectrum, it has its own different hex value. We don't need to memorize this. We don't need to figure it out. It's as simple as us just saying, I want to look up indigo hex value or hex code, same thing. So the hex value for this specific shade of indigo is going to be this set of numbers. So all I have to do is quite literally, I can copy and paste it and then replace what I had here before. Okay. And now my whole circle is going to be purple. Okay. So that's just kind of interesting if you want, so you can get a more specific color. So for whatever color you're looking for, you can also go to like a color hex code generator. And then you click on something like this and you can create exactly the color you want. Say I want this like purple or like pink. Change it. I can mess with it however I want. And then here your hex code gets created for you. So you can just copy and paste this. Yeah. So now we have another one in here. And then I hit run. And now it gets changed to pink. Okay, so take a second, try to find a specific color you're interested in and change that for your fill style. Don't get rid of the quotations. If you want to do something like add glasses to these, or you want to change the color of the eyes or make the mouth a different color, let's just do a few other things. So let's say I want to add glasses around the eyes, just to show you all a few other features you can do when it comes to drawing with JavaScript. So first off, all I'm going to do is go to the very bottom, still within my script tag, and let's say Ctx Dot Begin Path. This is me saying I'm creating a new shape. And then since I want to create glasses, it's going to be a Ctx Dot Arc. And it wants to be around, obviously, the eyes. So here, the eyes are what are considered white. So right here, okay, these are my first set of eyes. It's at 100, 100. So I want my glasses to start in the same place. I would just want them to probably be double the radius, right? So let's still say 100, 100. So they're centered around the eyes. And the radius of the white circle is 25. So let's make these 50. And then we want it to be a full circle. So 0 and then 2 times math.pi in all caps. Add a semicolon at the end. Now here, I'm not going to fill my circle because I want it to be just an outline of the circle, right? So I'm just going to say ctx.stroke. And then I hit run. And now I just have the outline for the circle. Okay? So I don't want to fill it because if it gets filled in, then it's going to cover up my eye. So now let's do that one more time. I'm just going to copy and paste because it's the same code, just adjusting the numbers. And this time, I want it in line with my other one. So it's 200 is where its x should be. So let's change my first number. And there's my second outline. And then let's add kind of, the lines for our frames that go to the side of our head, right? So to begin with, let's say ctx.beginPath because it's another element. And then instead of saying ctx.arc, I'm going to say ctx.move. And then this is going to be the starting point of my line. Okay, so all you have to do is we're going to dictate what the beginning point of my line is and then write another function to say how far it should go. And that's all we need to do. So let's say the beginning, again, this is a nice way you can kind of estimate, like you can say, okay, this is the middle point, so this is 150. I want my line to say start here and go till here, to kind of look like the sides of the frames going to the side of the head. So if this is halfway and this is 150, this is me estimating the x's and y's. This is probably 75. Let's even scooch a little more. Let's say, I would say like 40 or 50 is a good number to kind of get to this point here. So let's try that inside. And then that's my x. Now let's figure out my y. Same thing. Okay, this is 150 here. I'm trying to get up here. And this is 150. So this is again probably like 75. Let's try 75. Let's see what happens. Okay. And then let's go down and say, okay, that's my beginning. What's my ending point? So that is going to be ctx.line2. Where is it drawing the line to, right? starting here, and it's going to move down. So it's going to be just a matter of increasing the x by maybe 20, so let's say 60. And then it's moving down a little more, which means its y is increasing because this is 300. So let's try 100 here. Let's see how those look. The nice thing is you can always hit run and adjust it. So what we're going to do is click on run in the top left. Y'all, sometimes you might think you're having problems with your code, but in reality, you might have just forgotten to hit run and see the changes. It's a mistake that a lot of us make, so don't feel bad. Just keep that in mind. We got to say Ctx Dot Stroke. Let's finish it off. There it is. Okay, so there's my line. It's pretty close, but it's not fantastic. So it looks like I need to make my X a little smaller for my beginning point, because we said this is my beginning. Okay, so 20 looks perfect, and this one is a touch too long, so that means its X also needs to be shortened a little bit. So let's try 50, and then we'll go from there. Let's see. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, so is your glasses. So now for our other side of our head, I'm just going to continue. I'm going to copy and paste because, again, it's just a matter of changing the numbers now. And then let's look at this point. So I basically want this point to be all the way over here. Okay, super close. Let's just adjust this bottom one a little more. There we go. Okay, so that's how I was able to add glasses. So now you know how to create lines. If you want to try adding like hair to it, it's just a matter of estimating, where the beginning of the strand would be to the end. So make your self-portrait truly yours. Have some fun with this. And once you've decided, you kind of like how everything looks, we can move on to creating your quiz. Okay, so to get to your quiz template, that should be the next one you should have opened up. That's going to be the create your own quiz template. And so have this open, but just follow along. So just have this open, be on this screen. But what I'm going to show you is the completed version of what we're going to be doing. So we are going to be creating an all about me quiz. Okay, so you can feel free to give this to your family and friends and see how they get right with the questions. But basically, we've created 3 questions and some buttons for the user to click on. And if you get it right, then a image will appear that looks like a check mark. So here, answer the first question. I'm going to choose the correct one, which is volleyball, and see how I have my check displaying. And then let's look at the next one, my favorite food. So I'm going to pick the wrong one on purpose here. So I have an X displaying instead. And then one more time here, another check mark. So then here at the very end, I'm going to click on check answers. And because I didn't get all 3 correct, I didn't win. So let me hit run one more time, reset everything, and click the correct ones this time. And I hit check answer. Instead, I get a UN image. So that's what we're going to be doing today. And this time, instead of just using functions, we are going to learn how to write some of our own, some sort of mini sets of instructions to take in inputs and then have something happen as a result. That's all a function is. Okay, so let's see how we're actually going to build this. Okay, so this is what your screen should look like. What we're going to do is, first off, let's start by, kind of just getting everything to look the way it should. So let's say we want our header displaying first, the create a quiz game. So that is going to be between these H2 tags that have been written for you. So place your cursor right in between your two. Hit the space a few times so you can see. Okay, so the first one, it should say, quiz game, how well do you know me? So let's type that here, quiz game, how well do you know me? So then let's hit run. And there's our first header displaying. Cool. So the next part, we want this part to still be, large and apparent, but not as large as your header, your first one. So that's why it's in an H3 tag. And here, let's say, kind of the instructions, like how they know they need to win. So get 3 questions correct to win. So hit run, and there is your second piece. So now for each of these, take a second to add your own questions. If you don't want to say favorite sport, food, and dream vacation, don't have to. But in each of these places, we have created a paragraph tag. Paragraph tags just create body text. It looks a little different, but same overall concept, right? So So my first question is going to be, what is my favorite sport? So if you want to ask something different, go ahead. If you want to keep it the same, go ahead. And then let's create our next two questions as well. So here, the second one is going to be, what is my favorite food? And then my third question is going to be, where is my dream vacation? So then when we hit run, next to each of these question 1, question 2, question 3 pieces, our questions that we finished typing in are going to display. And the next bit is, let's give all of these buttons that the user has to click on some sort of correct options, right? So here on all of these sets of buttons where it says option 1, this is the text that displays on top of your button. So for each of these, we are going to say, we give 2 incorrect ones and then give a correct one, right? So let's say, for me, I'm going to give options of basketball, volleyball, and swimming. So my correct one is in the middle. And then let's do that for all of these. So now I want my correct one to be the first one. Don't put them all in the same order, obviously. So I'm going to say strawberries is going to be my correct one. And then I'll give 2 others that aren't. So let's say pizza. And then only between these, like what look like greater than or less than symbols, right? And the last one's going to be salad. And then here, I'm going to say, let's put the correct one back in the middle. So this is going to be Japan. And let's put the first one as South Africa. And then in here, let's say France. Okay, so now all of your buttons are going to display and have the different options. I can click on them. Nothing's going to happen yet because we haven't given it any sort of information. We haven't given it any sort of code that runs yet, but that's fine. It looks the way it needs to, which is the first step. So now one more thing we're going to do here is, you kind of see this little like random gray box. This is what the user is going to click on to check their answers. So let's give that some text as well. So here, right on this line, on line 34, let's say check answers. You put that at the end to see how many they got, to see basically whether they won or they lost. So let's hit run, and now that appears as well. Okay, cool. Everything looks the way it should for now. Let's actually get it doing something. So this is where we're going to start writing our functions. So you might see with all of these buttons, they have some sort of, some weird text here that says button on click equals wrong. What does that all mean, right? So this is us giving our button a brain. It's us saying, let's run this function here that says wrong, which is going to be written down here. And it's basically going to say whatever code is in this piece for function should run when it gets clicked, when this button gets clicked on. That's what it means to call the function, similar to what you did in your self-portrait, right? You told whatever code that the .arc function already had written somewhere else to run when you clicked on it and when you called it. So here, first of all, we have 3 functions that we are going to write. Some sort of code to run when the user selects the correct option. Some sort of code to run, which we're going to fill, is not going to look this bare, when the user selects the wrong option. And then some sort of code to run when this user selects their check answers button, right? Well, what code should run? Well, we know that the user selected the right option if they clicked on volleyball or strawberries. We can simply just say, depending on the button that's clicked on, run the right function, the function that is named right. And then inside of this function, we're going to add some code to say, let's display a picture of a check mark. So that's the first bit we're going to do. So real quick, now let's go back through, now that we know we have this function that's going to run, let's go back through here. And for all the ones that you said that were correct, change your function that should run when its button gets clicked on to say right. So now we have a different piece of code running. So for volleyball, that one should say right. For me, since strawberries was I considered my correct option, I'm going to say right here. And then for the last one, I put Japan as what was right, so I'm going to put right there. Keep your parentheses. Okay, this one doesn't require some sort of specific input the way that circle did, but that's fine. Sometimes functions require it, sometimes they don't. Today we're going to say that they don't. So now, what should go inside of the write function, right? So if you scroll up, I have some image addresses of certain pictures saved in these comments. Comments are basically little pieces of text that you can put on your screen that your computer's not going to interpret as code, and it's just there for us as a human to be able to read and have. But just to save y'all the trouble, I have the 4 image addresses of the pictures we're going to need, a check mark, an X, something to say you win and something to say you lose, already used, so that we can have some sort of picture displaying, and you don't have to like hunt on the internet. So what we're going to do is let's scroll down a little bit. And this function here, show image, has been written for you. Basically, what all this interesting stuff in here does is it takes in a source. That's what SRC stands for. The source is the image's address, where it has to search the internet to get the image. And the dimensions of the image that we would like it to show. If we want our image to be 200 pixels by 200 tall, we're going to give that input. And then I'll explain what alt is in a little while. So all we need to do inside of our write function is simply tell show image to run. We need this piece of information to run, but with what image address? Well, since the user selected the correct option, it needs to be the checkmark image address, right? So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to store the image address in a variable. So let's say var src equals, and then copy and paste this entire piece right here after the colon. So copy, paste. And then we're going to put the whole thing inside of quotations. And then add a colon at the end. So that's what this should look like. So now, all a variable does is it stores a specific piece of information. If you're used to using variables in math, it's the same concept, right? Like in math, you might say x equals 3. And then in your equation, anywhere that x is placed, you can substitute that value for 3. Same thing here. Here, source, SRC, we just, shortened it, holds the value of the image address. Anywhere where I type in SRC within just this function, inside of these curly braces, it's going to replace the image address. This is so that you can keep your function call for show image when you're using this nice and clean. And so I can just say show underscore image. I'm going to say the name of my function that I want to use and then give it the 4 inputs that it needs. So here I can just type in SRC. And then it turns blue because it recognizes that there's a variable within this function that holds this information. So it's the same thing as this whole image address being substituted in there for the first input. The reason you wouldn't just type it or copy and paste that image address inside is because you want your function call to be nice and neat, and it prevents errors from us making like little mistakes. So next, I'm going to say that I want my picture to be 100 pixels wide and 100 pixels tall, giving it its dimensions. Now, what does ALT mean? ALT or alt is us giving an alternate message. There could be 100 different reasons for why an image might not display here even though we've given it the code to. We don't want the reason for it to not be displaying to be because the image address no longer exists. These are pictures we're getting from the internet, so it's not going to necessarily be perfect. Sometimes they might, whoever posted the image in the first place could take it down, whatever. Or even, there could just be a problem with, something in here. There could be a typo for all we know, or we copy and paste it wrong. So by giving an alternate message inside of the show image function, it's us saying, okay, if there's something wrong with the image address itself, there's nothing wrong with my code, it's just maybe it's a matter of needing a new image address, let's have a message telling us that. So here I'm going to say quotations, and I'm going to say, we can't display that. And then add a semicolon after the whole thing. So here, another reason an image couldn't display could be because you have a bug or a problem with some code you might have written above or something else, right? But if there's something wrong with your code itself, this message isn't going to apply. This message will only show up if there's something wrong with this link itself. Okay? So now I'm going to hit run and then click on volleyball because I know it's going to run the write function. It's going to run this function. So I'm going to click on volleyball. And there's my picture. Now, if you're having trouble viewing your picture, try making the panel a little larger. It might just be kind of hidden from you. So try that out and that might help it. So now let's do a similar process for if the user got the answer wrong. So what we're going to do is same thing. Let's create a variable. I can name it source because it's in a different function. So it's not going to care that this one says this because here, whole other unit. And this time we're going to say equals, add our quotations. And then let's just copy the X image address, the whole thing. So I'm just hitting copy and paste. To do that, or you can right click after you've highlighted the whole thing and just say copy. And then inside of it, say Control V, Command V, or right click and say paste. Doesn't make a difference. Add a semicolon at the very end. And then let's say show underscore image. Don't add any spaces between your function calls and write this the exact same way I'm writing it. Don't add any capitalizations or anything. Computers are very, very specific. They're not going to infer, if something we wrote is 90% close, it's going to has to be 100% exact. So here, same thing. src, add our comma. That's going to give us this image address now. And then let's give it the same dimensions. So 100 wide, 100 long, and then add our alternative message, which is we can't display that. And then add our colon. Now, let's, try this out. So I'm going to hit run. Now let me click on what's going to be the wrong answer. There. And I can keep going through. Let's pick one last one that's correct. And all those pictures show up just fine. So next, how do we determine if the user got it right, got all three of them right or not? Well, what we can do is let's create a variable to hold how many times the user selected an option that ran this function that's called right. So to do that, I'm going to first off, above everything, I'm going to say var count equals 0. Okay? So this variable holds the value of 0. And then we are going to say every time that the user clicks on one of these buttons that's considered correct, we're going to tell count to increase by 1. So to do that, I'm going to say count plus plus. This just says whatever value that count currently holds, if it holds the value of 63 after count plus plus, the value of count is equal to 64. It's just saying increase whatever value that count holds by 1. Because then we know if the user clicked the correct button 3 times, that means that they got the answer, they got all 3 questions correct. If count is only equal to 2, if this function only runs 2 times, we know they didn't get all 3 of them correct. So all we have to do inside of our check function is we can now say, okay, if count is equal to the value of 3, equals 3, so if count is equal to 3 inside of quotation or inside of parentheses, 3, and then add a set of curly braces. So this is us checking for a condition. This is quite literally called an if statement or a conditional statement. It's us checking for a certain condition. In this case, it's us checking if count is equal to 3. We're not checking if count is equal to 4, or if it's equal to 5, or if it's equal to 2. We only want to care if that variable holds the value of 3. Then we're going to say, okay, same process. Show the you win image, right? So what a conditional statement allows us to do, it allows us to filter out when something specific should happen. It gives us more control. So here, let's look at the you win image. And I'm going to copy and paste the whole thing. And then same thing. Var src equals, instead of quotations. And then let's call our show image function. Let's give this the same dimension. And then we say, cool, now my UN picture is going to only display if the user got all 3 correct. But what if they didn't? What if they only got 2 or 1, right? So we're going to say, okay, if count is equal to any other number besides 3, then we are going to run another piece of information, another resulting action for that, which is going to be the you lose image. So to check for any other situation besides count being equal to 3, you simply can say else. If the first condition isn't true, then run this resulting action. And this resulting action that we're going to place inside is going to say run my instructions I've given it to display the final picture, which is you lose. And then let's hit our quotations. Last bit of saying show underscore image, src. So it says saying if count is equal to absolutely anything else, the user should get a you lose picture. So now let's hit run. And this function is going to run when we click on the check answers button, which is down here. And that's what we've said. When this button gets clicked on, run our check function. So I'm going to hit run. Let's say volleyball. I'll get one wrong so we can see the you lose first. Okay, check answer, and the you lose picture appears. And now let's see what happens when you get the correct one. Forgetting my own answers. And there's the you win picture. And with that, your quiz game is all complete. Make sure you save your project if you created an account, and have your family and friends try your game, see if they can get all 3 questions right and win. If you choose to continue with us to earn your second and third badge, you'll learn about loops and arrays and how we can write some of the code that we've done here a little bit more efficiently, and you'll learn some other fun tricks. So congratulations on earning your first badge.